Nice and easy for Syracuse football.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Syracuse football with a dominant 66-24 victory over Colgate inside the Dome on Friday night. And we're breaking it all down here in this post-game reaction podcast here on Locked On Syracuse. Hello, everyone. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on tonight's post-game reaction podcast, we are going to break down all the good, some of the bad in Syracuse's 66-24 victory over Colgate. We're also going to talk about all the firsts for everyone. Fortunately for Syracuse, they got up big early, so plenty of players were able to see the field for the Orange in this one, and plenty of players got their first career sacks, interceptions, and touchdowns. We'll talk about that later on in the show. Plus, the road ahead for Syracuse football. At 2-1, they're in pretty good shape, but spoiler alert, gets a lot more difficult from here. All that and more here on tonight's edition of the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Now, before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Here's the deal with games between an FBS opponent in Syracuse versus an FCS opponent like Colgate, like we witnessed on Friday night. There were mostly good plays by Syracuse football. Mostly good. As the score indicates, this was a dominating victory for Syracuse football. But we're not going to, at least myself, try to overreact to these plays. Yes, I saw Daryl Gill moss a defender. No, he is not Randy Moss, but it was pretty nice to see. Hey, Jamie Tremble with a great sack, right? That was his first career sack. No, he is not the next Lawrence Taylor. It also works both ways. There were some negative plays by Syracuse. They were not perfect in this game against Colgate. Was I expecting perfection? No. Because most of the time, even the best of the best against an FCS opponent will not play perfectly. Okay, so we don't necessarily overreact to the good. We don't necessarily overreact to the bad. So you might be asking yourself, Jackson, what's the takeaway here from this victory? What should we talk about? The big positive of this game is that Syracuse at no point really made us sweat. And that's actually different than last year against Holy Cross. I'm not going to sit here and say I thought Holy Cross last year was actually going to beat Syracuse, but that was a 7-point game in the second quarter and a 3-score game in the fourth quarter. It was, I guess, relatively possible if you were maybe saying it was between two FBS opponents at that time. This was a lot more dominant by Syracuse versus Colgate in this one. So they didn't give us really any reason to sweat, any reason really to make us doubt in this one. Let's go over the drives, particularly in the first half, because that's where Syracuse was really at its best when they were playing most, if not all, of their starters who were able to play in this game. First half offensive drives. Ready? Touchdown, fumble. That was unfortunate because Will Nixon on the first play after a Brahim Long interception fumbled the football, which just can't happen. You just can't fumble. It was just knocked right out of his hands. Just can't happen. Doesn't matter the opponent. Then, after the fumble, Syracuse, when they get the ball back, it's 7-3. Touchdown. That was the Daryl Gill mossing his defender from about 30 yards out. Yes, he actually did look like Randy Moss on the catch. It was pretty cool to see. After that, touchdown, field goal. The reason why there was a field goal was because Jonte Cook dropped what would have been a touchdown, but instead Syracuse settled for a field goal. And then touchdown. So they scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns. They had 1 field goal, and they had 1 fumble by Will Nixon. Offense, very good in the first half, doing exactly what they needed to do against an FCS opponent in Colgate. Defensively, drives, punt, interception, field goal, but keep in mind it was a short field after the Will Nixon fumble. I believe Colgate got like 20 yards on that drive, and then they had to settle for the field goal. Punt, turnover on downs, punt, interception, which was Demetrius Samuel at the end of the first half in the red zone, in the end zone. So it was a pretty, I guess, important interception, kept it 38-3 at the half. Now, at this point, when it's 38-3 at the end of the first half, feel free to comment in the comment section below whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me. I wanted Fran Brown to pull the starters out. I thought at that point, you have a 35-point lead. You are at home. Let's get everyone else involved now. You're not blowing a 35-point lead in one half to Colgate with your backups in. It's just not going to happen. But he did leave him in for a little bit, and the third quarter was not exactly good for Syracuse. They actually got outscored in the third quarter, 14-7. The defense in particular was Swiss cheese at times. So Fran Brown definitely will not be giving his team the benefit of the doubt. I do not imagine that he made the team run sprints. I'm not going to lie to you all. I turn the game off as soon as the game ends to go record these podcasts. So I don't necessarily I don't really watch the 10 minutes following a game. I just go right to this podcast. I don't think he made them do sprints, but let's just say he's probably not very happy about that third quarter film. I'm not going to sit here and say like he should be lackadaisical over it. At the end of the day, he is the football coach and he has to make sure his football players are prepared for what's going to come. And if you're going to make mistakes against Colgate, it's going to be a lot worse when you make those same mistakes against much better competition, right? At the same time, I'm not going to overreact to it. Bad plays are going to happen. The defense we already know is not particularly good. They did step up in the second half against UConn, so they did show that they can be relatively successful, but they're definitely not a consistent defense. So did we learn anything about the defense because they weren't very good in the third quarter? Not particularly, in my opinion. But hey, are you worried? Are you concerned about it that Syracuse let up 24 points? Comment in the comment section below. Overall, for me, I thought it was a nice and tidy Syracuse blowout victory, exactly what they were supposed to do, didn't make us sweat, and that's why I'm feeling pretty good after this win. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to sit here and say, hey, in the road ahead, Syracuse is not going to lose from here on out because they just beat Colgate by a lot. You get the picture, though. Not overreacting to all the highs, not overreacting to all the lows. Syracuse, they took their free win, and they got it. Get ready for Clemson next week. But before we discuss Clemson, which is next week, we'll talk about that in segment 3. Coming up, firsts for everyone. All the players who got first career sacks, Jamie Tremble, first career catches, touchdowns, all that and more. Here on tonight's edition of the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Stick with me here in this post-game reaction. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, how about Daryl Gill's touchdown to make it 14-3 Syracuse in this one? Still relatively early in the game. It's still within the realm of possibility that Colgate could, in theory, pull off a magical upset. And Daryl Gill simply mosses his defender on a free play for a touchdown. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. As expected, Syracuse football dominated Colgate with a 66-24 victory on Friday night. And because they dominated Colgate, Fran Brown, the head coach of Syracuse, he was able to play plenty of guys who normally do not see the field for Syracuse football. A lot of young players saw their first collegiate action in this game. I guess this portion of the podcast here can be the congratulations segment of the podcast because we're going over some of the firsts from tonight's game. Let's start off with Demetrius Samuel Jr. had his first career catch on offense, and he had an interception. We discussed in the lead up to this week's game how myself and probably many of you wanted to see Demetrius Samuel be used on offense because, after all, he is a two-way player for Syracuse football. Well, we saw him on offense and we saw him catch, I believe, a 10-yard out in the first half. So it was good to see. It wasn't anything splashy. It wasn't anything wow, but it was pretty cool to see like, wow, that guy can actually play wide receiver too. So that's nice. First career interception, which happened at the end of the first half. We talked about in the last segment, and also first career catch for Demetrius Samuel. Jamie Tremble, first career sack. Now, Tremble, for those that missed it, maybe it's okay if you did, is learning another position. I mean, kind of learning another position because he did play linebacker as well in high school, but he was recruited by Syracuse as a 4-star tight end. But the Orange are also making him a two-way player as a linebacker. So it was nice to see him get a sack in the first half. Then you had Brahim Long, which was the first career interception for him. It occurred on Colgate's second drive of the game. And at this point, Syracuse was only up 7-0. So technically, it was actually a pretty impactful play in this game. But unfortunately, wasn't as impactful as it could have been because that's right after that, Will Nixon fumbled the ball, which happens, unacceptable, but happens. But still, Brahim Long with an interception. You had Caleb Singleton in there. We talked about him in the lead up to this game. Get his first career tackle. He's a true freshman, 3 or 4-star recruit, depending on the major recruiting service you use. One of the highest rated Syracuse recruits in the 2025 class. So good to see him on the field. And now we could talk about Ricky Collins. How about that? Because he got his first career Syracuse completion, not his first completion overall, but first Syracuse completion, and also his first Syracuse touchdown and first overall touchdown in college football. So Ricky Collins came into the game with less than 5 minutes remaining in the third quarter. And before having watched Ricky Collins actually play for Syracuse, I strongly was disagreeing with what Fran Brown was doing. He left Steve Angeli in the game too long. Okay, he left Steve Angeli in the game too long. You're up 38-3. Angeli should have been pulled to start the third quarter, but okay, you want to give him a drive to start the third quarter, that's fine. He should not have been out there for that second drive of the third quarter. But then Ricky Collins does eventually come in, and we see why Steve Angeli's named the starting quarterback. Because, look, Ricky Collins did some good. He did have a nice scramble in this game for 15 yards. But on one of his first pass attempts, it wasn't his first one, but on one of his first ones, he massively underthrew his receiver down the left sideline, and it was an interception. It was a pretty ugly interception by Ricky Collins. I'm not going to try to overreact to what we saw from him, but let's just say this. I think there's a reason why Steve Angeli was named the starting quarterback, because I think Steve Angeli only put the ball in harm's way one time, which might have been the first play of the game itself. But we did get to see Ricky Collins in this one, which was pretty cool. First career touchdowns to talk about. Ricky Collins, we just discussed, but he threw that touchdown. It was a 12-yarder to Gabe Daniels, who is a true freshman. Jalen Hornsby got on the board with a 25-yard touchdown near the end of the first half. Jalen Hornsby has actually gotten on the field for Syracuse throughout the first 3 weeks of the season. He's pretty young, but I do think that going forward, not just from what we saw this game, because again, I'm not going to overreact to this game, but it's in combination of this game, but also what we've seen from Jalen Hornsby in the first 2 weeks. I think one day he's going to be a real player for Syracuse. Not to suggest he's not a real player, but I think as soon as next year, we could see him being one of the top wide receivers on this team. Because he looks pretty good. He's big, he's long, he's pretty fast, he's shifty. I like Jalen Hornsby's future moving forward. And just for what it's worth, I'm looking at the stats right now. Jalen Hornsby had 4 catches, which was tied for second on the team, for 56 yards, 1 touchdown, and 6 targets in this game. That was also second on the team. Darian Williams, true freshman from the Syracuse area, went to CBA high school, 26-yard touchdown early in the third quarter, and it was also his first career catch. Darian Williams is a pretty highly rated prospect, had a number of schools go after him. He finished with 3 catches for 72 yards. And then finally, how about this one? Luke Carney, a true freshman quarterback on a QB keeper. It was very interesting how Luke Carney got his first career touchdown, because I don't know if Luke Carney was really supposed to play in this game. We did, by the way, end up seeing 3 quarterbacks, but it might have been by accident. It was in the fourth quarter. Syracuse, after some botched punt by Colgate, they get the ball deep in Colgate territory. Ricky Collins scrambles, but he loses his helmet. And if you lose your helmet, you, no matter what, have to come off the field for a play, which, by the way, I don't know if that's a good rule, that if you lose your helmet, you automatically have to sit out a play. Why can't you just put your helmet back on and keep playing? I don't know. I'm sure there's some reason. I'm sure the medical experts out there can probably tell me why that's a rule. But regardless, Ricky Collins' helmet pops off, so he has to come out. At this point, you're not going to put Steve Angeli back in the game. That's just absurd if you put Steve Angeli back in the game. All right, not Ricky Collins. All right, Luke Carney, you're in. True freshman quarterback. You're in for 1 play. Make it count. And, well, he did make it count. He had a 9-yard rushing touchdown. So 1 play, 1 touchdown. I believe that makes Luke Carney the most efficient quarterback in all of college football. Perhaps he should be the starter of this team moving forward, because every play with him is a touchdown. That's a fact. It's a fact. 1 play, 1 touchdown. Every play he's been in has been a touchdown. Don't come at me. So overall, it was nice to see so many different players get on the field. So many different running backs too. True freshman Tyreek Hill got some carries in this one. We saw Malachi Coleman as well get some carries. Plenty of defenders as well out there who got some action that maybe don't normally get a lot of action. It was nice. That's what these games are really about. You go up as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Then you start subbing in a bunch of different players in this one. Who were you happy to see get on the field? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, coming up, the road ahead for Syracuse football after this victory over Colgate. It's going to be a lot more difficult now. Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days, or staying focused, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. I always keep a few packets with me. It saved me more than once from that midday crash, particularly when I go to the gym sometimes, right? Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. It's about to be the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. let's break it down. And since Syracuse football played on Friday night, we can just name the player. We can name the MVP right now. And a lot of guys to choose from. A lot of great performances out there. Let's go with Steve Angeli. 24 of 32, 417, and 5 touchdowns in this performance versus Colgate. And just like Steve Angeli delivered for Syracuse, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. We are now officially 3 weeks into the 2025 college football season. So after Syracuse football beat Colgate on Friday night, 66-24, the Orange are sitting in a pretty good position. I think we would have all signed up for this position after 3 weeks if I gave it to you right before the year started versus Tennessee, that the Orange were going to be sitting there at 2-1. Not only was it something that I think most of us would have taken, it's also, I think, what was the most likely outcome. We knew that Syracuse was going to beat Colgate. We knew that. That was a free win. Tennessee, we knew would be difficult. We gave Syracuse an outside shot and an upset, but Tennessee is Tennessee. They took care of business against Syracuse. And then there was UConn, the game that Syracuse really had to win against an improved UConn team. And they needed a comeback, but they got it done. So through 3 weeks, Syracuse football is 2-1. That means they need to win 4 of the final 9 games of the regular season to qualify for a bowl in 2025, which I have said so many times here on this podcast is the expectation for this team. I know the schedule is hard. I understand it. I know there's a lot of young players on this team. I get it. You still got to make a bowl. Making a bowl as a power conference team is an expectation pretty much every single year. Okay? Having said that, from here on out, the road ahead is going to get a lot more challenging for Syracuse. They got their full ACC slate coming up. That includes road games at Miami, at SMU will not be easy, even though SMU lost, at Georgia Tech. Oh, and I'm probably missing someone, I'm probably missing someone, right? Oh, yeah, next week at Clemson. At Clemson next week. That's fun to kick off the ACC season for Syracuse. And you might be asking yourself, hey, Jackson, what's the final non-conference game? Well, that's not going to happen until very late in the season. But I'm glad you asked who it is. They're going to South Bend, Indiana to take on Notre Dame. Fun, right? For Syracuse football. So, yes, it is going to get a lot more difficult from here on out. They will not be playing Colgate 9 more times this season. Now, Clemson Tigers on the road is the first game coming up. That is next Saturday at noon Eastern. I'm very curious to see what Clemson is going to be like versus Georgia Tech. Very, very curious because they've been a little off to start the year. I excused them for their performance against LSU because LSU is a really good team. LSU is one of the best teams in the SEC. They're one of the best teams in college football. Same thing with Clemson. They were allowed to win at home, but ultimately, touchdown loss to a really good team at home, not the end of the world. And it also was an out-of-conference opponent. But I'm not going to sit here, in case you might have missed my comments and what I said in Locked On ACC. I cannot ignore what I saw with Clemson against Troy. That was embarrassing. Now, they won. You got to give them credit for winning, but it did not look pretty. That's why I'm really curious to see how they look versus Georgia Tech. But no matter what, whether they win, whether they lose, no matter how they look versus Georgia Tech, I'm still going to look at that game for Syracuse against Clemson and say, it's really difficult to go out and actually win that game. You have to go on the road in Death Valley. That's not going to be fun. And Clemson, they get great athletes. It's very similar to kind of Tennessee, where a lot of their guys are 4 and 5 stars out of high school. They got a ton of talent. They're going to have the talent advantage against Syracuse. It's not going to be easy. A lot of the same keys that we were talking about with Tennessee are going to apply to Clemson. So that's really the road ahead coming up for Syracuse football. So, with that being said, do you still think that the Orange are going to make a bowl in 2025? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. As far as what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future, tomorrow, which is Saturday, we will have the fan reaction podcast from you all, just taking your fan comments, putting them up on the screen and reacting to them following Syracuse's victory over Colgate. Sunday, there will be no podcast, but we will be back on Monday and throughout the entirety of next week. Monday, big picture takeaways. We can really recap the first 3 weeks of the season, where Syracuse is really sitting at. And on Tuesday, we begin prep for Clemson. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like Locked On Syracuse, please feel free. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps Locked On Syracuse grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And again, leave a comment in the comment section below your thoughts on Syracuse's victory over Colgate. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you all again soon.